So it is September 22nd, 2015, and we've been talking about World War I and the practices of war and the weapons of war, which have, hello Stephen, come on in. Okay, now it's been recorded on video, so we all know you have no proof.
New schedule?
Just one class.
So, what we're seeing with militarism is the development of weapons and then the continued development of weapons. Because every time a weapon was introduced on the battlefield or in some theater, on the sky, on the ocean, wherever it is, there's always a counter to it. How do you develop a counter device? And actually today that continues. It never ends. That development of technology. In fact, I have an uncle who worked at St. Lawrence Livermore Labs, and he worked on some weapons that were developed for the Middle East. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the problems that soldiers had in Iraq and Afghanistan were IEDs. Ever know what an IED is?
Homemade bomb, right?
An improvised explosive device. Improvised meaning they would, the terrorists, whoever would steal, like I say, 1,000-pound bomb, an artillery shell, and then wire it to a device to set it off. How would they do that? Cell phones. So how do you counter that? You jam cell phone service so you can get your convoy through without blowing up. One of the weapons that my uncle worked on was a radar-guided minigun for a Humvee. So when our convoy was going down the road and the bad guys shot an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade, at the convoy, as soon as it launched, the radar systems on the Humvee would pick up the launch and then point the minigun to the trajectory of the missile, the bomb, coming in. And we're talking about bombs shot from like less than 100 yards away. But it's got to be fast, right? Pick it up, spin it, and shoot a burst of ammunition into the path of the RPG and blow it up before it gets to the convoy. So that was very successful. And when the war was winding down, the General Petraeus, who was in charge of the war in Iraq, came to St. Lawrence Livermore Labs in California to thank everybody for working on these different projects. And he wanted to know if he had gotten everybody. And my uncle had just retired and moved to Oregon, and so my dad was visiting my uncle, his brother, in Oregon, and the phone rings, and it's General Petraeus wanting to thank my uncle for his service in the counter weapons in the war against terror. So I thought it was pretty cool that his personal connection for my family, but that it keeps on going. It never ends. Every time there's a weapon, it's going to be like, this is the latest, greatest thing. There's going to be a counter weapon to it. How do you defend against that? So I want to talk about submarines for a moment, which are one of the most important weapons of the war. And there's some important things to understand about submarines, besides just the fact that they hide underwater and shoot torpedoes. That's important, and I'll get to that. But there's something even vitally more important than that, and that's their sort of psychological impact and diplomatic impact, and their impact on how the war will be, how the United States will actually get into the war. That'll be one of the reasons the United States get into the war. But there's the psychological impact I'm talking about is that this weapon, it goes beyond just sinking ships. There's a ripple effect that happens in diplomatic circles, a ripple effect that happens at the highest levels, where people are discussing this weapon and what to do about it. And there's kind of a strange paradox that occurs. in the war with this weapon that comes back to, more like an irony, comes back to haunt the Germans. So, let me go back to the beginning. When Germany was trying to figure out a way to counter the threat of the the British Navy. The British Navy had the largest navy in the world. It went around, it spanned the planet. And with that navy, the British could really control a lot of things. They could control entrance and exits, and bottle up harbors, and cause starvation. And that's one of the things that the British did with their navy. They did cause a lot of starvation. In fact, most of the German civilian deaths in World War I were from starvation because there was not enough food in Germany because the ports were all blocked up. If I could go back to this map, it shows you Great Britain. Here's Germany. Germany does have ports on the Baltic Sea, via the North Sea, via the Atlantic. This striped area, right here between Great Britain and the mainland, is this spot where the British Navy has focused all their attention. There's a blockade going on. So nothing gets in to the ports of Germany, which means no food, which means no ammunition. So Germany is really on its own in a lot of ways to produce everything it needs for a two-front war and its own civilian population, which it can't do. It can't supply that. And so that's a huge weapon that the British have. So the Germans, knowing that they could never catch up with that level of numbers of ships, invented a weapon that would counter that, and that was the submarine. The submarine sneaks underwater, and its genius is that as it hides underwater, it can kill many ships. As they go by, you shoot a torpedo at it, you sink that ship, and then it goes away, it hides. At the beginning of the war, they would actually surface and warn the cargo ships that they were going to sink them. Why? Why would they warn cargo ships that we're going to sink you? Jake?
So people could get off with it.
Yeah, exactly. It was a humanitarian gesture. We'll allow you sailors to get off the boat before we just blatantly kill you and drown you. Okay? So, unfortunately, that gesture didn't last long because what would happen when they surfaced?
They get shot at.
They get shot at, yeah. They cannot get shot at. It's like an egg for a weapon, right? It's delicate. Its only way that it can avoid being killed itself is to hide underwater. As long as it's underwater, it's safe from being shot at. As soon as it surfaces and gets shot at, any crack in that hole, that boat sinks. Doesn't matter, yeah.
So go back to the map for a second.
Yeah. Back to the map.
So the pink is German, the German blockade, quote unquote, of Ireland and Britain, right?
Yeah.
Why weren't the Germans able? Why were they able to be effective around Britain and Ireland, but they weren't able to secure their own harbors and ports for supplies?
Well, they're trying to sink these ships. Good question. Why can't they just sink all these ships and break up the problem? What's going to happen is that there's going to be a counter to the submarine.
Oh, what?
So in this theme of countering, the counter to the submarine is called the destroyer. It's a new kind of ship, and its only job is to destroy submarines. So a new technology is invented called sonar. Sonar uses sound to send out, they call it a ping. It still happens with your phones, by the way. Your phones are always pinging the Wi-Fi. So this sound wave would ping, and the sound would bounce off of a metal object, namely the submarine, and that would tell where the submarine was located. You go over the side of the submarine, and the weapon is called a depth charge. So the depth charge is, like say, 1,000 pounds of explosives, and you dial in the depth. Now you know the depth of the submarine is 100 feet below you. You set it to go off at 100 feet, you drop it into the water, and as you're moving, and as you sail off, it sinks down to where the submarine is in the vicinity, and it explodes. And it doesn't have to hit the submarine at all. All it has to do is cause enough concussive shock waves to crack the steel of the pressurized submarine, right? It's like a water balloon in reverse, right? It's like an air balloon underwater. Anything that touches that thing, it's going to explode. It's going to break and crack and sink. So submarines are very vulnerable to that. So they had to stay away from the military ships, the destroyers, and go after more vulnerable targets, cargo ships. Cargo ships might carry a deck gun, and if you surface, they might shoot the deck gun at you. But they're not carrying depth charges. They're not circling around looking for you. They're on their way to someplace else.
So the Germans knew the submarines were effective, but they figured they'd use them against the cargo ships rather than attempt to go up against most of the military?
Exactly.
Okay.
Go after cargo ships, because when one torpedo sinks a cargo ship, and it might have tons of ammunition on board that was intended to supply British troops or French troops on the front lines, and now they don't have it. So, or food.
Okay.
And I don't have it. So it can be just as effective as a blockade.
So the British Navy was really concerned with having domination on the sea, whereas the German Navy was more meant as a way to kind of help on the front lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and the surface navy that the British have is also stopping any kinds of weapons or
From getting to
food from
Germany.
getting in. So that also has an effect on the front lines and the people on the home front. The home front is starving to death. Yeah.
Did Germany not have the Southern Ocean or sea at this time? Or do they? I feel like they do now.
No, they still don't. If you look at the map of Germany, the southern border is France, Switzerland, the Czech Republic comes up, and then Poland. So the only ocean contact they have is the Baltic.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you block off this, nothing gets in or out. It's a very narrow channel to guard. It's kind of easy. So. So going back to vulnerability of submarines. So did you write this down? That the British have invented sonar and depth charges to find and destroy submarines. Depth charges and sonar to find and destroy submarines. And the ships are called destroyers. We still use them today, along with helicopters. Helicopters can cover more territory. We also have listening devices. The entire Pacific Ocean and part of the Atlantic Ocean is bugged with listening devices under the ocean. We have a computer registry of every vessel, large vessel, not just not speedboats, but every large vessel that plies the waters of the Pacific Ocean. The U.S. Navy listens. When that ship or submarine goes by, it has a sound signature, like your voice. When you hear someone's voice, you connect a name with it. When we hear the sound signature of a vessel, we have a name with it. We know whose vessel it is, the name of the ship, who it belongs to, and we know where it's going. Why do you think we keep track of every vessel in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic coast?
If like people are like, if like say China, because you were talking about China earlier,
Yeah.
it's like get compiling forces in the Pacific Ocean against us, possibly.
Yeah, where has that ever happened before?
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. After Pearl Harbor, we decided we were never going to be surprised again that way, and so we set up this system. It was top secret up until the 1990s. Now you can actually log in you get an app and log in with your phones and stuff and listen to the ocean wherever you want. And, it's like the internet. The internet was originally designed for military purposes, and now we're all using it. The satellites, they use GPS, were originally designed for military applications. Now we're all using it to keep track of where we are, and Google Earth and all those photos. So all the military applications are now being used by civilians. Have you ever heard of an exploded view? An exploded view?
Oh, it shows like what would happen to a place on Google Maps if a nuke went off or something?
Well, I've heard of that, but no.
Oh, okay.
We'll get to that when we get to the Cold War.
Sounds good.
An exploded view is a schematic where they take it all apart, so you can try to figure out how to take it apart and put it back together again. Okay, so I have a play on words here. You have to explain the joke, maybe it's not so funny.
I think I get it.
You can get it? This is a German submarine on a French coast. It was destroyed. It's hit by probably a depth charge in shallow waters near the French coast, and it washed up on shore. Look at the damage. The people that were inside this thing obviously died instantly by the concussive shock of the explosion. So. This is that early period where they would warn you. Notice how the boat is surfaced, the cargo ship is sinking, and what do you see in between the submarine and the cargo ship?
A boat.
Yeah, a lifeboat. A lifeboat. These people have gotten off the ship, and okay, we let you live. Bye bye. See you later.
And so did they just get picked up by another?
Yeah, they're passing. You're in the shipping lanes. They're not going to take you on board because they don't have room for you.
So what if a cargo ship got sunk, and then its people were on this lifeboat, and another cargo ship came by, and they're like, "Oh, you can get on our ship," and then that cargo ship got sunk, and that just happened perpetually.
You have a cargo ship with people hanging off of it. Can we just get through? How about we just throw everything overboard and put the people inside? I'm sure there probably are some stories of sailors who were probably rescued more than once. Less dangerous life for them. Okay, so I want to talk about the paradox or the irony of the submarine. So here's the irony or the paradox. The Germans doubled down on submarines. They put a lot of time and effort and money into submarines. They didn't develop tanks. They developed submarines. So the submarine is designed to be able to help win the war. Right? If you can prevent the enemy from getting all their supplies, because submarines will sink anything that comes through, you could win the war. Conceivably. So they sunk a lot of ships in the effort to do that. Here's the problem. After a while, they could no longer warn ships because they get shot at. So they never warned ships anymore. This was called unrestricted submarine warfare. Write that down. Unrestricted submarine warfare means they sink without warning. And they sink anything that could be carrying war supplies. And on your map that you wrote, you put an X on the map of where a particular ship was sunk. Lusitania. When you think Lusitania, think Titanic. It's very similar in size and shape to Titanic. I don't know if they were sister ships.
I think it was. In the book.
I think there were three: Mauritania, Titanic, and Lusitania. Or there's Britannia too. So I think there were 3 or 4. So, but they're all ocean-going ships, right? I mean, passenger ships. And when Lusitania was sunk by the Germans, it really came back to haunt them. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, everyone had figured out later on that Lusitania did have weapons on board. That's why it sank so quickly. It was weighted down, and there were secondary explosions from the weapons blowing up on board the ship. Once that torpedo hit the weapons exploded and blew the bottom out of Lusitania, and it sank quickly, and that's why not many lifeboats got away. So here is the situation. If you make the United States angry with you for sinking American cargo ships, and you bring the United States into the war, how are you going to win?
Sink their ships before we get there.
Yeah, you really have to sink all of their ships before they get there. You have to sink their troop ships, right? But what's going to happen is, by the time the United States does get into the war, because of submarine warfare, the submarines will be less of a threat. The destroyers will have done the huge work on them, and there will be a convoy system set up where you have troop ships in the center protected by a ring of military ships, destroyers circling constantly, and no American soldiers ever drowned getting over. So the submarine is the thing that was supposed to win the war, but in the end got the United States into the war, which meant Germany losing the war. And that's the irony of the submarine. Okay? So write that down. The submarine was supposed to help them win the war, but it actually got the United States into the war, which made them lose the war. Okay, so that's a little foreshadow of where this is going. I want to shift gears and talk about the war of attrition. Oh, question.
Yeah, just one.
Yeah.
So the battleship's counter was the submarine. The submarine's counter was the destroyer. Was the destroyer's counter the battleship? Or did they make something else?
Oh, how do you destroy destroyers?
Yeah, you just battleship.
Well, submarines could go up against destroyers. They could try to catch them off guard and torpedo them. But yeah, the larger ships, of course, could sink smaller ships, like you said, mentioned battleships.
Mm-hmm.
There was really only one major naval battle of the war. That was the Battle of Jutland in the North Sea. And the Germans and the British went at each other with a fury, and they both lost like a couple of battleships, and they basically called it a draw and pulled away. But those larger ships, those battleships, really never came back out again because both navies were afraid of losing them. They had so much money and firepower invested in these large ships that they realized that they were vulnerable. And so they just sort of kept them in port. And so the German Navy, the surface Navy, basically rusts throughout World War I after the Battle of Jutland. And if you ever see it in writing, it looks like Jutland, J-U-T-L-A-N-D, Jutland. So it's It's sort of left to submarines and smaller vessels like destroyers. Yeah. Okay. So shifting gears. Great battles of attrition, 1916 and 17. So we've established the fronts. We've established the 400-mile long front. And so now the cult of the offensive will sort of ramp up. And one of the sayings was, we're going to bleed the enemy white. We're going to bleed the enemy white. This is what is meant by attrition. We're going to make the battle so costly for the enemy that they don't have enough troops to carry on the fight anymore. We're going to bleed the enemy white. That was the cult of the offensive. We're going to attack, attack, attack until they don't have enough men to defend themselves anymore. The unfortunate thing about this overview here is that both sides will have so much invested into this that they will keep supplying more and more men. That's why so many millions of soldiers, I think it was 9 million soldiers, 9 to 10 million soldiers are killed in World War I because of these huge battles of attrition, which is really, really sad. It's the saddest thing about the war, I think, is that they just keep throwing men at it. Yeah.
Which country said going to the enemy one?
Well, both sides said it.
Okay.
Both sides said it. In fact, there I have it in writing. Bleed the enemy white. 5 million soldiers were involved in these 2 years of battles. 5 million soldiers along a 400-mile front. That's just a lot of people. A lot of men in uniform. We've never had, and never, I don't think ever will have, hope, that many soldiers ever involved in a war, in battles. They are looking for the elusive, decisive battle. Elusive because they keep thinking that the next battle will be it. If we can just devise the next great battle, that will be the one to end the war. And it never does. Everybody takes their lumps and they just keep on going. No matter how many men they lose, they continue to put more men into uniform and on the battlefields. Where are they getting all these men? This is called the lost generation. Most of these countries, the majority of men of fighting age are killed. A whole generation of young men wiped out. Here again, nationalism comes into the story. National pride prevents them from doing anything different. We cannot give up. And so, after a while, after 1917, it's not how can we win, it's how can we not lose. How can we prevent ourselves from losing this war? Everybody is all in. Everybody is taking the huge gamble. And it's really sad for the soldiers involved because they're the ones being wiped out. And we really have to blame the generals and the politicians, the leaders at the top. They really don't understand how to use the new technology. I've explained how the tank was this, awesome, terrible weapon of war, but they could never really fully implement it in a way that could win a breakthrough.
Was there another war where the generals didn't, like to a grand extent? I think I remember that being applied to another war, but maybe.
Yeah, it can apply to other wars. I would say Vietnam is a great example. When we get to Vietnam, there's a huge misunderstanding of the enemy on the part of U.S. military. The idea that we're going to bomb them into the Stone Age, which they already were, kind of. I'm exaggerating, but this whole idea that we could do the same thing. In fact, this was kind of the idea in Vietnam. They called it a body count. We're going to kill so many of the enemy, they cannot possibly keep on fighting. That never happened. We killed millions of Vietnamese. The problem in Vietnam was the leader of Vietnam said, okay. Doesn't matter how many of you kill. And in the United States, that was not the attitude. We didn't say, oh yeah, we'll sacrifice as many men as it takes to win this war. No. That was not the attitude of the American people. In Vietnam, we protested against the war because we didn't want that many people killed. In Vietnam, there were no protests against the war. Okay, so the Battle of Verdun. Battle of Verdun is one of the most famous battles of World War I. It is a German plan in a French city French city called Verdun. So the Germans intend to create a trap for the French army. So Verdun was surrounded by 19 French forts. So I'll just draw sort of an image for you here. So if this is Verdun, okay, and this is Germany, and we're in France. So Verdun is a French village, and all these forts were designed to protect France from any sort of German invasion coming through. So what the Germans did was they created something, it says a bulge here, or a salient. So here I'm going to draw the German lines, different color. So here are the German lines. They follow this fortress line like this, and like this, and like this. So these are the Germans. This blue line is the German front. Here is the bulge in the line. Verdun is supplied by a road okay? And the French decide we cannot give up Verdun, we cannot let the Germans have it. Now the Germans have purposely not taken it. They could have taken it anytime they wanted to. They had enough troops to do that. They have purposely left it to the French. Why? They want to think about it. Why? Yeah, Jake.
Is it so that when supplies come off the road, they can just take it inside?
Yes. Take what? Take what?
Supplies, like food and weapons?
They will try to supply Verdun, right?
And the Germans will take it while it's on the road.
Take what?
The supplies.
Will not take them. John?
Go ahead.
So what they want them to do is because Germany outnumbers France so much in Battle of Verdun, they want more troops to be sent in so the numbers in Verdun will be higher and then Germany will completely overtake. That way, a lot of their numbers will be destroyed in one simple battle instead of many multiple battles. Is that what it is?
You're on the right track. You're on the right track. They're never going to take Verdun. That's never the intention. The intention is to keep Verdun open so that the French will come in, they'll try to supply Verdun, and so that means the French will fight all along here, all along here. These will be where the French supply the troops to keep this road open. The whole idea is to draw French troops into protecting the road and protecting the village of Verdun and fighting all around Verdun. The whole idea is to keep bringing in French soldiers to keep Verdun open. They're pretending The Germans are pretending that they want Verdun. They don't want Verdun. They want the French soldiers to die protecting Verdun. And so they do. For 10 months, the French believe they're protecting Verdun. And they really are just losing men doing it. And that's exactly what the Germans want. 700,000 deaths. That's one battle over a 10-month period. We lost 58,000 in Vietnam over 10 years. Okay? We lost 53,000 in Korea over 3 years. We lost 200,000 in World War II over 4 years. We've never lost 700,000 men in any period of time, let alone less than a year.
Was it just French that
You know, I think now that I think about that, that's got to be both sides, right? Yeah. Maybe so we can do the stats on that real quick.
Even
Battle
still,
of Verdun numbers, but yeah, still. I think it makes a point.
Was there more than one battle? There was more than one battle for done.
It's sort of like continuous warfare. I mean, on and off, breaks and breaks. So, what are the Germans? How are the Germans killing all these French soldiers? Well, the Germans know exactly where they are, so they can lob artillery shells on them. That's how they do it. They just kill them with artillery shells. Artillery. Yeah.
So what would have been the smart thing for the French to do? Like if they had known that Germany doesn't actually want Verdun, what could the French have done to make this less of a terrible loss?
Let them have it. I think the cult of the offensive, this mindset that you had to attack in order to win, is allowing the French to lose so many people. If you shut that mindset off and you say, we're just going to stay here and make the Germans come through. Make the Germans come through to Paris, right? We're going to just stay right here. And we'll put all of our artillery in place. We know where the Germans are, and we'll make them come to us. But instead, we're going to them. And the Germans hoped that these losses would make the French want to surrender. But it didn't. The French, with their national pride, said, no, we're not going to surrender. It doesn't matter how many they lose. I'm trying to think of the percentage, but the majority of French soldiers, I don't know the exact percentage, but the majority of French soldiers fought at Verdun. What do I mean by that? France knew there was a French general who wanted to save his men as much bloodshed and insanity as possible. Keep their sanity. You couldn't just keep men here for 10 months. Right? It just couldn't. So he developed General Pétain. General Pétain developed a rotation system where you would go and fight for a couple of weeks and then they'd pull you out. Fight for a couple of weeks and then pull you out. So they kept sending men who had been rested behind the lines into the fight.
What was that guy's name?
Pétain. P-I-T-A-N. Pétain, this is one of the ways that they were able to keep up the fight for so long, that those men just didn't stay in one place and go insane and mutiny. So there was a saying in France after the war, when they saw, you could tell who had been at Verdun. They had the 1,000-yard stare. There were men who would just look off at nothing, and they'd say, oh, he was at Verdun. Because it was such, you survived shelling for 2 weeks. I mean, I can't imagine you know, how raw my nerves would be after a day of shells landing all around me. You know, imagine that for weeks on end. Well, that didn't work. Yeah, got some numbers?
Yeah, so I don't know how to pronounce the website name because I think it's German,
Yeah.
but it says that approximately 70% of French troops,
70% of French
70%
troops
of the dead French troops
Right.
died in.
died at Verdun. Right. Wow, that's a lot. 70% of the deaths. That's a lot. So Verdun's huge. And so if you're ever writing an essay describing how World War I was fought, you could use Verdun as an example of battles of attrition, where, you know, they just killed hundreds of thousands of men. All right, the Battle of the Somme, 1916. This is the second Somme, I believe, because the first Somme was 1914. I don't think I get rid of this. Oh, sorry, I was the Battle of the Marne. Never mind. Never mind. I got my battles mixed up. Battle of the Somme.
Were people redirected from like Somme to like Verdun or something? There's something where troops who were supposed to be sent somewhere were sent to another like major battle or thing.
Yeah, I think the Somme was, yeah, exactly, right here. The Somme was started as a diversion to Verdun.
Oh.
So the French were saying, hey, Britain, help us out, because we're allies, right? And so the British started an attack. So what they did was they had this huge artillery barrage at the Somme on the Germans. Just millions of shells launched for weeks on end to soften up, quote unquote, the German lines. And they were expecting a breakthrough. So much so that each soldier carried 70-pound packs because they were expected to supply themselves for dozens of miles into German lines to push the Germans back. Hey James, do you want to have an appointment? So what happened was the Germans, while this shelling was going on, built fallback positions miles and miles behind the battle lines. It was an ingenious anticipation on the part of the Germans. So that when the soldiers finally went in and pushed the Germans back, they encountered stiff resistance that they didn't expect. Because they went through the abandoned trenches and into the fire of the new trenches that had not been destroyed by the artillery barrages. Genius. And so they got 7 miles in 5 months at the cost of 1 million British casualties. Unbelievable losses of numbers. And the British people were all thinking, what the? How is this possible? How can we lose this many people? Now, maybe again I'm saying this is probably for both sides.
Yeah.
Again. But still, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of men lost in battle. Even if it's 500,000, that's a lot. But again, nobody gives up. The attrition doesn't work. The Battle of Champagne. In the spring of 1917, the French decided, well, we'll go on the offensive, called to the offensive. Huge expectations of a breakthrough. and the Germans prepare another line behind their line called the Siegfried Line. And they reinforce it, expecting this attack. The attack comes, and it's a failure. They reach the Siegfried Line, and they're repulsed. It was such a letdown on the part of the French, because they had been told over and over and over again, this is going to be the big breakthrough, we're going to go all the way to Berlin, and they hit the Siegfried Line and nothing happens. They stop flat and they fall flat on their faces, they're stopped and they're dead in their tracks. And French mutinies actually break out. They refuse to attack anymore because it's futile. Every time they attack, they're killed. So the French army has to keep this very quiet. They don't want everyone to know about it. Certainly don't want the Germans to know about it. They don't want the French public to know about it because, you know, it would look bad and France might feel like giving up. There might be protests in the streets. I don't know. So after that, they promised their own men, sorry, no more offenses. No, we're killing the cult. We're destroying the cult of the offensive. That goes back to what could they have done? Fight a defensive war only. There's not going to be a breakthrough. What they're starting to realize is that it's impossible. There's not going to be a breakthrough. They've worn their men out. So many of them have sacrificed everything. And of course, when you talk about the sacrifices of the men, that of course includes their families. You have lots of widows and orphans in France and in Germany and in England. Okay, one more battle. In French, it's probably pronounced Ypres. Who takes French? You guys? How would you pronounce Ypres? Ypres? The British couldn't pronounce it, so they called it wipers. Wipers. It's also known as the Battle of Passchendaele. This one was really interesting. They thought, okay, so now the way we'll solve this problem of trenches is we will tunnel underneath the German lines, a series of tunnels, like 10 of them. They brought in miners from Wales. Welsh miners were famous for their tunneling skills, and they tunneled miles underneath no man's land, and they planted explosives in these, at the ends of these 10 or so mine shafts they tunneled straight across. There were times when they were digging these things and there was actually tunneling duels where the Germans, who were hiding in their trenches underground, heard digging, and they would dig toward the digging, and then they would like break into somebody else's mine and throw grenades in and kill each other. So they had to dig very quietly so as not to be detected. And they had to dig so many tunnels, 10 of them, because if one was discovered, they could just continue with the other ones. So, 1 million tons, that's just incredible, these incredible numbers. 1 million tons of TNT were planted in these, at the ends of these tunnels and lit off in a succession. Boom, 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 boom. These explosions were so big and loud, they were felt in London. They rattled the windows in London, across the English Channel. And the hope was that these giant explosions would cause so much chaos amongst the German lines that they could just follow up with an attack and kick them out.
Why did that work?
Why didn't that work? So they went in, yeah, they followed up. Of course, the Germans resisted, and then the rains came. Bad timing, I guess. And all that earth that was destroyed by explosions and everything else turned to mud, and some of it was so deep that the tanks disappeared into the mud. In fact, if you go to France today, there's a series of lakes, ponds, from these craters that they created.
So basically, they decimated the German lines, but they couldn't actually like go anywhere
Right.
because there was just a bunch of mud.
Yeah. They destroyed, they made these gigantic craters, and the rains came and filled them up with mud. Of course, it's not just those craters, it's all over the place. They did make 5 miles of advance, and then they stopped. One British officer went out in his vehicle, and this truck or car got stuck in the mud. The officer had not been out to see this. He stood up in this vehicle and looked at this ocean of mud and said, "My God, did we send men into this?" They didn't even go look. So the outcome of the battles, trench warfare